What am I up to now? Welcome to Urban Monk TV.
Hey you guys, this is a little bit different approach to starting out one of these videos. I'm actually editing the video that you're about to watch. And is this thing an epic fail? Maybe from one perspective. I think it's a really good example of how life can throw you some curveballs and how you gotta just regroup. Take a step back before you make some steps forward, that kind of thinking. This was not a successful attempt at doing a custom fiberglass seat pan, but I'm not giving up on the idea. But just see what happens to me here. And I've already got an idea how I'm going to make this work, so we'll get there, but this wasn't it. Enjoy.
So it's time for me to get started on the seat pan and rear cowl. And while I have a bunch of experience working on both automotive engines and motorcycle engines over years, I started my I'll say mechanical career in my teens, working at an auto parts store and service station as moneymaker, while I was also starting a career as a musician many years ago, and learned a lot about working on cars. And just growing up in North Dakota, there was just that culture there, and you worked on your own vehicles, and my father worked on his own vehicles, and blah blah blah. Got some experience with engines, got some experience with making old motorcycles run. What I don't have any experience doing is fiberglass work. And so I'm going to be learning this process right along with you guys as I make a custom fiberglass seat pan and cowl for my Cafe Racer here. I've done a little bit of YouTube University research here, and I think I got a plan. Who knows? I may end up at a brick wall and we scratch this and start all over. I don't know. The journey begins right here. So let's take a look at what I've done so far. First thing I did is I went to the arts and crafts store and got a bunch of this florist's foam, which for some reason I have to say slowly or I mess it up every time. It's like a tongue twister. And I went ahead and did some of the work ahead earlier this week after work, which is just gluing all these pieces together, because I wanted to dive right into shaping it here on the weekends. So you missed out on that piece, I'm sorry, but I just want to explain briefly my logic behind how I did this and a mistake that I made. So I knew I needed a big thick piece of foam, and you can't buy one of these, so you buy the little blocks and you glue them together. And you need something to start on, so I saw online a guy starting with a piece of styrofoam for the bottom that was just one solid piece, and I hoped that I could get one thinner than this. This is almost, well, it's got to be 3/4 of an inch. Sorry, I don't know what that is in millimeters off the top of my head. And it's a little thick. The problem with it, I'll show you later, is when you try to cut it or shave away a portion of it, it just comes in little balls, and that's a little bit too aggressive possibly. We're going to learn together again. We'll find out. Then the next thing I did was start gluing all of these pieces together. At my local craft store, which for those of you in the US was a Michaels, they had this Krylon brand spray adhesive. This is their number #7. And I initially went looking for 3M777 or 777. I've worked with that before, but this seemed to work pretty good. And I essentially just sprayed it on both surfaces to be glued together, and let it get tacky for maybe 15-20 seconds, and then press them together. Then I had to let it dry overnight. This stuff, you know, even in 5 minutes later, I could still grab it and pull it apart quite easily at that stage. So get it together, press the pieces together as best you can, and then leave it. That's why I did it ahead of time, because I wanted to be at this stage for you guys this weekend.
The other decision I made along the way, for better or for worse, is that I really tried to change up the pattern. This comes from experience I have in building pallets in my industry. When you take a bunch of boxes and stack them on a pallet, if you've got them all lined up exactly one on top of another, then there isn't any overlap of the gaps between each layer. Whereas, you know, like here you see this line does not line up with this line, and ultimately that's a stronger arrangement than if I had that line lined up everywhere. I hope that makes sense, but by building it like this, you get far more rigidity just naturally by the friction between the blocks. You know, we'll see. Another thing I did was just laid this piece down, shaved off the edges. There you see evidence of, you know, the problem with this styrofoam is it just comes off in balls and chunks and not a clean line. So that may be a problem for us. But I also neglected to cut it to size on the back end, so I'm going to have to do that. And then, I don't know, I had these 2 extra blocks that I threw up top in case I needed some height, but I really don't believe I'm going to need that height because, as I've talked about before, I'm using the divine proportion or golden ratio to dictate design elements and dimension on my bike. And so I know that roughly the height of this rear cowl overall is going to be about 5.5 inches. Then it should be visually a good accompaniment to the height of my gas tank. And then some of the tools I'm going to try to work with here today, again, having no experience, having done this before, just kind of going with what I saw on YouTube and what has worked for me a bit just playing around with this material. I see a lot of guys using the old electric carving knife on YouTube, so I have one. I pulled it out. I don't know that it's necessary, but we're going to give it a swing. Then I just got good old serrated edge bread knife here. Try one of those. This is a high quality Wusthof, you know, chef's knife with a razor sharp blade to it. I may find that that works pretty well. This is a rasp that normally you'd use with woodworking. I'm not much of a woodworker, but it has this very aggressive, I don't know, abrasive area to it. It's got one that's flat and one that's rounded. And so if I need to make, you know, a rounded channel, and I think I will have to, I got, you know, flat and rounded. And then this is, I call this a plane. I'm sure there's a more accurate name for it. Again, not Mr. Woodworker here, but I got a brand new one of these things, so this thing's super sharp and ready to go. I think that'll help me shave material well. And then of course the other thing I'm going to be using is just pretty coarse grit sandpaper. I'm guessing something like a 60 or, you know, aggressive. And another important detail here is that this seat pan that we're building has got to mesh up or join with the gas tank in some sort of fashion that makes sense. And so get your gas tank out. To do this work without referencing it might be pretty dangerous. And then if you will recall, I raised the height of my gas tank a little to get a better straight line here. Like that. And so I made a custom made little bracket, which I'm currently in the process of painting. I've only got primer on it right now, but if you're doing similar things like this, make sure that you get these parts out and get that tank exactly where it's going to be before you start this seat. Okay, I've got that loosely fitted now, so that's where this is going to be. And I can make a nice union there between the seat and the tank. And then again, just to revisit the math behind the design, this tank is, roughly 9 inches high from here to the top. So that's 9 inches of visual mass. And so back here, if I take the golden ratio and divide 9 inches by 1.618, that's going to give me visually how high I want this back here. And if you look at my previous videos, the other dimension also matters. If I take this visual mass in this direction, divide by the golden ratio, I get a number that comes to right here. And so that cowl is going to begin here and come up to 5.5 inches or so. Is I'll do the math here in a second. It's going to be somewhere around that. And it's 5.5 inches high. It's going to start right here. I can't remember what that distance was. I want to say it was 14-ish. So that's it. You know, don't live to the actual decimal on this stuff, but get close and it should look good. It worked out on my stripe.
So 9 inches of visual mass divided by the golden ratio of 1.618 gives me, again, roughly 5.5 inches tall. That is what we're going for.
And 5.5 inches tall from where? From the bottom of that seat, or the frame rail, or from the top? Well, looking at the line coming off of the visual mass we're trying to match up with, the tank, it's going to be the top of that rail. So we want that hump to be 5.5 inches tall above the hoop, essentially.
So before I go measuring off 5.5 inches in height from here, I want to make sure that the bottom of this is down and settled into the exact position it will be in when I begin forming the fiberglass. So I'm thinking I want to run some channels in here so that this thing just settles down around the frame rails just a little bit. So that's my next step, is try to mark that out. But before I do that, I have to get it settled in as far up as it's going to go. And because right now, you know, my foam is actually starting back here, and I really want it snugged up against the tank. So I'm going to have to start this whole process right in here and cut some of this out to bring this up. Then I can work on the height of the thing overall. Something like that.
And another thing I did was extend that florist foam block on the front up over the edge of my base a little bit, because I knew I would be cutting away some material and trying to snug up. I still may have to cut away some of this foam, but this was kind of my foresight attempt at thinking about this. You may want to do differently. I don't know. It depends on your project.
Another thing I noticed is that guys get pretty messy with this, so I'm outside because this stuff gets everywhere.
And I'm near the trash cans. Well, so far so good. I've got it cut out now, but I need to shave away the center
In here so that it'll snug up even more this direction. And so far what I'm finding is that the X-Acto knife is a nice tool because I can slice in at angles, I can pick material out, but I can also just scrape sideways, and it kind of, so far so good. I like the X-Acto knife for this.
And now I ran a Sharpie permanent marker around the outside perimeter of the frame rail.
I want to start running an indent for the rail. So far so good here. But I gotta say, I almost wish in hindsight that I had done this piece first before I glued all of the green on, because I really can't, I could break this pretty easily, it's fragile. Well, one thing I didn't learn at the auto parts store back in my late teens and early 20s was sculpture. But I gotta say, now that I'm into this a little bit, this is fantastically satisfying and very calming. I love it. Really could like burn up a whole day doing this and not think too much about it.
Peace. I'm at peace. So one thing I can see already is I've got a mass of material back here I'm not going to need. Might as well just make it easy on myself and get rid of it now.
Through the styrofoam. Put my good kitchen knife against the metal frame. That works pretty good if you got one around the kitchen. Sharp, sharp, sharp. Nice place to store it. There.
So ultimately, I don't want my seat pan to be this high. I want to shave like half of this away. My concern is I'm going to lose my rigidity if I do so, but you know, I got to do what I got to do. Okay, I have had a complete adhesive failure. Not so much with the green blocks, although some. I think I can save that piece. But with this white styrofoam, this adhesive just melts away, and I really did not have a stable platform to be building that on. So, starting over here a bit, learning a lesson, and you guys can learn right along with me, but I'm going to go get a different adhesive. I'm going to go get the 3M 777 and see if I have better luck gluing these pieces together.
Actually, I noticed that this glue is working with the green florist foam. It's just not working with the white styrofoam. So, learning as we go again, and I'm sitting here with my little disaster, trying to pick up the pieces. And what a fantastic life lesson, you know, in a little microcosm, I'm having a crisis that doesn't feel so good to be in at the time, but it's giving me a new perspective. And how often in life are we in a situation like that? Sometimes they're pretty amplified. But essentially what I'm learning as I go here is I've got this big bulky section that is pretty rigid and well adhered to itself, and I've got this more fragile thin section up here. And as I cut this away, you know, I'm thinking ahead about this, as I cut this away and get it down, 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 it's just going to get more and more fragile. And if it's connected to this piece, you know, it's just this huge
cantilevered piece out of here that there's no way in heck I'm gonna not break that as I manipulate it. I'll let this truck go by. So I got to thinking, why don't I just work with these for now as two pieces? Then I can always glue them or tape them together later on to form my mold. Ultimately, this all gets completely destroyed anyways when we tear it out of the fiberglass shell that we're going to build on top of it. So I think that's my learning from my little crisis is A, forget this stuff, guys. B, just build the foam, and if you want, this piece can be done separate from this piece and they can be joined later, and we're probably going to have an easier time with it.
And for now, I just need to let this glue cure again and get these pieces back together. So I've clamped them in my work table here, and this may have to be it for today.
So I'm going to take it as a sign from the gods that I am supposed to pause here and that I should get on my motorcycle or get my golf clubs out and do something else with this morning. Sometimes in life you just gotta, let the universe take you where it intends for you, and don't resist. So we learned something. I think this is going to be a valuable episode, and we'll get the thing published here this weekend so you guys can watch. As always, I appreciate each and every one of you for watching, and this project will continue, and thank you for watching.